Hello, everybody. I am Jan Jeremias, and welcome to Pets, People, Life, and Longevity. I am here with my canine companion, Tonka, and a little bit about me. I'm a trained scientist who began exploring holistic and alternative healing about 18 years ago. I began my journey with the use of essential oils and began exploring modalities such as Reiki, gentle massage, energy work, and anything to do with pets, really. I am the co-author of the top-selling essential oil book called Spoil Your Pet, a practical guide to using essential oils in dogs and cats. And today I'd like to welcome Anne, and I'll tell you a little bit about Anne. I'm super excited to have her with us today. So Anne has been working with pets. I couldn't believe it when you wrote me and you said you've been working with pets for 30 years because you really don't look like you're old enough to have been working with pets for 30 years, but she's always loved pets. Like I think most of my guests were pet people on the show. And her passion, she became a veterinary, she worked in a veterinary office for over 31 years, and she became passionate about health for pets with an emphasis on nutrition. And I know that Anne firmly believes, like I believe, that nutrition is the foundation of everything. If you don't have good nutrition, you can do a lot of other modalities or a lot of other things for your pet, but they need that base nutrition to function and to live really, really, really well. And so, Anne, why don't you tell us a little bit about, your work in the veterinary office and how you became so interested in nutrition?
Well, first, Jan, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm honored to be here and to share all this with your listeners. I was working just in retail at the time, and I've always had such a passion for pets. And I knew I wanted to do something, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went on a path looking. Did I want to be a dog trainer? Did I want to be a groomer? Did I want to have a dog walking business? And I ended up getting a position in a veterinary office. It was a small one-man practice, and at the time when I joined, and I was able to get trained across the board and do just a little bit of everything. Assist as a technician, which was pretty much assisting the technicians. I'm not a technician. And running the front office. And I noticed that there was a lot of problems with the pets. There were a lot of skin problems, a lot of ear problems, a lot of gland problems and other things, licking paws. And I just noticed that was going on. I didn't know anything about nutrition at the time. But then a very dear dog of mine, Abby, developed kidney disease at the age of 9 that progressed into liver disease. And then she developed a fast growing cancer and died just so quickly. And it was devastating to my husband and I. We don't have children. Our dogs are our children. And we were thinking, what in the world is going on? Because, we're giving her good food and we're treating her right. Why did she die so quick? So we started doing research, and we discovered the real truth about pet food, that really not all pet food manufacturers have our pets' best interest in mind. And so they will, a lot of the big companies at the time were buying out small pet food companies just because they could make a lot of money. And that made me really start investigating. And I came upon a company that I liked, and I liked the fact that they were made their food fresh, and the product formulator also was a holistic veterinarian. So I switched my girls over to that. And then all the dogs that I had after that, and they've all done great. And I realized that nutrition at that point really was, like you said earlier, the key to life. It's our foundation. And it also put my husband and I on a path for better nutrition for us. So it's been a fun ride.
I love that, because I did the same thing. I got into essential oils and holistic modalities for my animals, and then I started using them on myself. And it always reminds me of all my friends who do the same thing, but they're working with their human kids and trying to help their human kids, and then they go along for the ride, Yeah. So it's so sweet, because I think we all do the same thing. We try to help people we love, or beings that we love. And then we're like, well, it's working for them. And really what I'm saying and thinking about for their health is really applicable to me. So but however you get there, right?
Right. Yeah. The path leads to the good spot for sure.
Right. I know that I read an article a number of years ago on pet food, and I was astonished at what I read. And I always tell people, I think the pet food aisle in the grocery store or in any store is even if you go to like one of the, like a big pet food store, like one of the companies that's across the country, the pet food aisle is overwhelming with 1,000 different brands and 1,000 different types and different formulations. And I think that it's so confusing for people, and every bag has a picture of a really cute dog or kitten that looks really healthy. So, I think it can be very, and so I think one of the most interesting things that one of the most useful things that people have to do is they have to start to really look at the ingredients.
Yes, you have to look at the ingredients, and you need to get yourself educated on what those ingredients mean. For instance, a lot of time, if you look at a pet food, and the first ingredient is chicken, well, for me, I'd say, boy, that's what I want. I want chicken as the first ingredient. Well, that's mostly water. But when they make it into a meal, which there are various different levels of meals, so you want a good quality chicken meal or lamb meal, that extracts the water. And because the guaranteed analysis is based on weight, or not the guaranteed analysis, but the ingredient list is based on weight. If they put chicken first, you're really paying for water before you get to the meal. So you really want chicken meal as your first ingredient, or lamb meal, or some sort of a meal, not just the whole chicken. And you also want to stay away from byproducts and non-species specific meals like animal fat. You want a chicken fat or a lamb fat. You don't want just animal fat or animal digest, those kind of things. So people do need to get educated on the ingredients and what they really mean.
So interesting. I know that my dog has food sensitivity. So when I had to go look for food, I got really, really good at looking at ingredient lists, because there were certain things he couldn't have. And so, like, he can't have lamb. And so looking for foods, you can't have sweet potatoes. So, and carrots. So after a while, it was like, okay, well, where is it on the ingredient list? Because I assume, or I've always assumed, maybe this is incorrect, that the lower it is on the list, the less amount it is in the mixture. That's always what they've
correct.
Said. That's what they've always said about human food, that so I assumed the same thing. So if carrots were way down and he can't have carrots, I was like, well, there's nothing else in this food that he can't have, so I'll go with it. And most of the time it worked really well. But I think there's such a difference. So maybe what we should talk a little bit about is a dog that is nutritionally complete. So you're feeding, what would be their appearance, and what would be the difference besides for things like itching and everything? So maybe your dog's not itching, but maybe there are other signs that their nutrition is not optimum.
You would see a dog that has a dull coat. The coat should be shiny, and they shouldn't shed a ton. Then some breeds are going to shed more than others, but when they have a good quality food, they're not going to shed, and they're in optimal health. They're not going to shed as if their immune system is compromised. So you want to see bright, happy eyes, less shedding, not a lot of tartar on the teeth. If they have eating inferior ingredients, they're going to build up more tartar.
Oh, interesting.
They're going to have, I'm sorry?
That's interesting.
Yes, they're going to build up more tartar. They're also going to have large amounts of stool and softer stool. The more nutrient complete the food is, nutrient dense, the less stool they're going to have, and it's going to be firmer, more like Tootsie Roll, if you will. And with cats, it's not going to be as stinky, which when you have a litter bot, that makes a difference. And it's not going to be either for the dog either, but for cats, because of it being inside with the litter box. And you're going to see a happier disposition with a dog that is in good health. Just like you and me, when we're not feeling good, we go on vacation and spend our weekend eating a lot of junk food and fun food, if you will, like we did when we were kids, and you could get away with it when you were kids. At this stage, you're just not going to feel well, and you may be a little bit more grumpy, and just not wanting to play. And that's true with the dogs. They're not going to want to play, run, and jump into your car. They may be more apt to just wait to be picked up when they don't have optimal nutrition.
One of the things I've always found, and I know that is that better quality food, they tend to eat less because it is so nutrient dense, and
yes,
as opposed to a lesser quality food where to become satisfied, they have to eat more.
That's very true. Because it's so full of fillers, they're not getting what they need. So the more nutrient dense, I mean, you can have a big dog that you could be feeding 4 cups of food to a day, and you get on a good quality nutrient dense food, you could cut that back to 3.5, sometimes even cut it in half, because they're eating what they need. And the same is true with us. If you think about it, if you sit down and eat a few grapes or an apple, you're satisfied. But if you open a bag of potato chips, you can eat the whole bag, and because there's nothing in there that's really nourishing your body. It's more fun. So same thing. It shows up in our dogs as well. Same thing with treats too.
Yeah, and I want to get to treats. One of the things that I had a conversation with a number of vets over the past few months, and one of the things that everybody talks about is obesity in pets, which is a huge issue, or just being overweight pets in general across the country, at least in the US, is really high. And the portion sizes on the bags are not necessarily, for a lot of commercial pet foods, are not accurate. And really,
True.
they're more than you actually need to feed your pet.
Yes, that's very true. They're selling dog food.
That's right. They're selling pet food. Yeah, I know. I hate to say it, but the more your pet eats, the more they sell. So
right. And that's and it's hard for them to know the energy level of your dog.
Right.
So if you have more of a couch potato kind of dog that likes to hang around and just lay around with you, and they're going to eat the same amount of food on the back of the bag as a dog that's out running in the backyard for 6 hours a day, they can't take all that into consideration when they're giving you the amount of food to feed. They're just going across the board. And so you have to start with that and see how they do and move up or down depending on your dog. But when it's full of inferior ingredients, you're going to get a chunky pet. and that's going to cause joint problems. And you're also going to see dry, flaky skin and flatter coats with those dogs too.
Yeah, recently I had a mixture. Been feeding my dog for a really long time, and just a combination between stuff I cooked and prepare and commercial, and he's always been on the thin side. So I take him to the vet, and she said to me, I really want him to put on a little weight. And also his coat, like in the front was really shiny, but toward his hind, like by his hips, it was really dry and flaky. And so I started adding in some other food types, and I took him in, and first of all, she was super psyched because he had put on 2 pounds of muscle, because she said it was like, because he is really active. And so, like you said, sometimes it's hard because he's the type of dog where he could probably eat all day and he wouldn't put on weight, or he'd just be normal size. Like he's never going to be heavy. And so, but his coat, I noticed the other day, his coat totally changed. I mean, it's slick, it's slick in the back. There's very, very few flakes. Like really,
that's
really
wonderful.
Really few. And so I was super psyched. And so it's, it's nice to see when they look so vibrant. It's such a beautiful, because that's what you want. You want them to be here for the longest amount of time they can be here. And so one of the things, though, I'm not a huge, yes, he is very food motivated. So I still use treats to get him to do things, if I want to, especially if it's bad weather outside and I want to do any games with him in the house just to keep him occupied and get rid of some of the energy. I'll hide treats, or I'll go to the opposite side of the house. He has to come, sit, lay down, and I give him a treat. But I'm not a huge treat giver. It's just I've never been that way with him. I feel like we give treats because we feel guilty a lot of the time. People who aren't home all day feel like they have to give their dog a treat when they come home because they feel so sad that they were gone all day. And depending on the size of your dog, that might not be a good idea. But quality of treats makes a huge difference in also how much weight they put on and what you're giving them. To me, it's the equivalent of, like you said, giving potato chips versus giving apple slices,
Right. Yeah, it really does make a difference. A lot of the treats are full of inferior ingredients, and they're actually just junk food that we give our pets. And we, like you said, we're doing it more for us and for our feel good than we are for them, because they're just as happy to get a little piece of apple or a little piece of carrot or a good quality nutrient dense treat. And they're also happy to have a portion of the treat and not the great big treat. And I've seen people that give those great big, huge bone shaped treats that are, as bigger than my hand. And they'll give 3 or 4 of those a day to the dog because they love them. Of course they do. We loved Twinkies when we were kids, and that's all fun stuff. But they get chunky, they get joint problems, and they're wondering why their dog has arthritis and loose stools and dull coat. Well, it all comes down to nutrition.
Yeah, and a myriad of other ailments that develop from from being overweight, which we haven't even mentioned yet. So I noticed that I'll see this every now and then, and I'm sure, but maybe talk about a little bit about pet food recalls, because I know that happens quite often where you're here that a company has, done a recall on the food that you've been feeding your pet or on the lot number. So what has happened and how can you find out about that?
Well, a lot of times you don't even get to find out about it. If it's a big recall, like the one back in 2007, where the melamine was in so many dog foods, of the foods that were manufactured in China, I believe it was, that was on the national news. And actually, I was working in the veterinary field back then, and I didn't know about the recall. Wow. And people started calling, talking about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I'm not a big news watcher. I don't sit down and watch the local news every evening. And so if you're not in the know, you have no idea. So you have to be diligent to either find out from a trusted source, either, your veterinary office, hopefully, or through social media or through the news. But a lot of times you don't get to even know about it, which is scary because some of them are, just they are not life-threatening. They're just a recall for one reason or another. But there are many life-threatening recalls. So the public, I guess you could say it's a public informed system. It just doesn't work very well for us. So you got to subscribe to different social media channels to find out.
Yeah, I know. I get Whole Dog Journal, and they have a pet food list, and I think they have a recall list. They also have a rating system of what they rate as good foods or better foods versus lesser quality foods. And I have looked at that list a number of times and I find it useful. Probably, I'm sure there are a number of Facebook groups you could join, like pet nutrition Facebook groups and whatnot, to see what people post. But when you think about it, if you think about even human food recalls, basically you find out about it on the news. Same thing, like how are they going to know whether you ate that certain thing? They're not.
Right.
So they're really leaving it up to the consumer.
And it's usually just a blurb on the news. Oh, this so-and-so recalled this lot of pet food, and then they go on to something else. So if you happen to get up to go into another room for 10 seconds, you could miss it. And some of the smaller companies will have the ability to contact their consumers, which is pretty nice. That's a nice feature to have.
I think that's a brilliant feature to have. And that just reinforces to me buying from a smaller company, because they have the ability, they probably have a mailing list of everybody who has bought from them. So they can fire off an email blast and say, okay, just FYI, this has been recalled, or we found this, just want you to know.
Right. And that's because it can be too late. If something in that recall is lethal, to wait to see it on the news, or even in print, if you get magazines, which I'm not sure many people get magazines these days versus reading them online. But you want to be informed right away, especially if you have a little bitty dog or a cat. It doesn't take much to rock their health right out of the world and really get them sick or even lethal.
Right. Now, one of the things that I was interested in is, so you're feeding your pet a certain food and you decide you're going to switch and foods, and then we could talk about your pet food challenge or your healthy pet challenge, because I want the listeners to know about that. But I know that through the years I've learned different tricks, because you can't switch them so abruptly a lot of times, because depending on their diet, for my animals, it's always affected their digestive system. So I've always had to do it slower. And so why don't you give our listeners an idea of how they can switch pet foods and what you feel like, what things have worked for you?
Well, it is important, like you said, not to switch abruptly, because that can really wreak havoc and create all kinds of stomach issues. So it is best to switch over a week. And if you have a really sensitive pet, there's no reason to go longer. There's no reason to rush a pet food transition, unless the pet won't do it correctly. But if you are interested in trying another product, you can do a healthy pet challenge, where you can put the new food down, and not a whole serving size, but just some of it and some of the old food, and let the pet decide and see which one they like. And then once you find that they like the new food, that's when you go into, okay, let's do a transition, and let's transition it slow. And you want to start with a fourth of the new food and 3/4 of the original food for 2 to 3 days. No stomach issues at that point, then you can go to step 2. If the stools are getting a little upset, just do it longer. And step 2 would be 50-50 for 2 to 3 days. And you don't have any transition then you go to 3/4 new and a fourth old for 2 to 3 days until you get all the way onto the new food. That's going to be the best way to avoid any stomach upset or stomach refusal or food refusal. Some people will just say, this week I'm going to buy this food, and next time they go shopping, they're going to try it different or top it with this or that. Well, that confuses them because they're not like us where we like variety. They like consistency. So if you just do too much all the time, you'll end up with a food refusal where they just won't want to eat.
I didn't know, but I have always done like transitioning, and my dog's been on the same diet for quite a long time, but my cats, when they got older, I had to switch because the food that I had been feeding them became too rich. They were really old, and I had to switch. And I remember one of my guys would not eat the new food, yet it was making him sick. So I had to switch, and I was like, buddy, you can't eat this anymore. And I ended up splitting the plate, and he ate both. But if I put the old food out on its own, he wasn't going to eat it. But once I added the new food in, which was a friend of mine owns a pet food store, and she said, do that. He just kind of kept going. And then I just did that. I kind of made it larger and larger. And it didn't.
That's smart.
But it was so funny because it was like once he got started eating, he wasn't going to stop.
Then he couldn't stop.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So it was very sweet. And do you find that they really, I find animals so wise, like they have a wisdom about it, and it's almost innately like they know what's better for them. And so I feel like that with pet food, that they do know that it's a better quality, and they tend to probably by taste and by just that innate sense, know this is better for me.
Yes, I truly believe that they do know that. They sure do. This is not pet food, but this is a kind of a cute story that goes to that. I went to our local hardware store with my dog, and they had a popcorn machine. This was many years ago before COVID, where you could get a little bag of popcorn and go around and do your shopping. Well, this popcorn had a lot of lard, and just a lot of lard in it. And my dog would eat popcorn at home with me when I would pop it myself. She loved that popcorn, ate it all the time. So we went to the hardware store, and I got some popcorn, and I gave her a piece, and she put it in her mouth and immediately spit it out. I gave her another. She wouldn't eat it, and it was not good popcorn. And because it was full of lard. They do know what's good for them. They instinctively know.
I had that with water when I lived in my old area. I always thought that, Tonka was a camel because he never drank at all. And I was happy that I was adding like liquid to his food because I figured at least he was getting some liquid that way. And I moved, and now I fill up the bowl like 4 times a day. And it must have been something about the water that he didn't like, whether it was the water or the pipes or something. It was a pretty
interesting.
It was a pretty old house. But afterwards I thought to myself, oh, like what was that doing to us for all those years?
What about me too?
What about me too? And what was in that water exactly? But
yeah,
they have that kind of sense where they know. Not to say that he doesn't drink from puddles, or something, and I'll be, buddy, don't drink that. But if it's in his bowl, he'll definitely monitor what it is.
Yeah, they do. They surely do know. Before they even came into our house as our pets, they just know what's the best thing to eat. And when they went and scrounged to find their own foods. Sure, they'll eat stupid stuff in the yard that we were like, oh my gosh, why are you eating that? But
right.
They do know for food wise.
How many Well, with a good quality pet food, I always think twice a day, basically, morning and night, because none of my pets have ever grazed. I don't allow them to graze. There's mealtime and then that's it.
Right.
And so I wonder, is that pretty standard to feed twice a day?
It is. Yes, it is. Yeah. For puppies, more often, just because they're growing, but for an adult, and some people will go once a day with feeding, but I think twice a day. I know I would prefer to split my meal and not stuff myself once a day, but to fill myself up and then do it again. And I think they do best. They do know when it's time to eat when you do a schedule. And daylight savings comes and that wreaks havoc on them because they're an hour off, asking for food or asking for it too early. Yeah.
Yeah. And because all of a sudden it's like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And I'm like, buddy, it's too early to eat dinner,
Yeah.
But my guy's really funny though, because when he doesn't usually talk, but when I'm getting the food ready, he starts to talk to me. It's really fun. It's like, it's really sweet. My last dog was a real talker, like not a barker, like he would talk, and he used to like a whole conversation. So it was really sweet. And so now I think it's so beautiful. So now do you just help a lot of people kind of nutritionally match for their pet and kind of help them discern what is a better food for their pet?
Yes. The more people that we can help to educate and get them on a food that's beneficial for their dog and not just filling the void and feeding a food that's not going to help their body thrive. So many foods, I mean, you can thrive. You can just survive on a food, and many of the foods on the market will help them do that. They're complete in balance, but it's not enough to help them to thrive. So to educate them on good ingredients to have in your food and ingredients to avoid is going to make a big difference in the health of the pet and on the everyday feel good and be happy, healthy pets.
What about supplements? Do you offer your pets supplements?
I do. And I don't do the same supplements necessarily for every dog. Right now I'm down to one. So, but when I had my Labrador, she would take the agility, an agility supplement because she had more need for it than the dog that I have now. But there's also just a general vitamin. Every animal has stress in their life, just like we do, but not all stresses are negative. There's positive stresses in our lives. So, and a stress on an animal could be a new animal coming to live in, or a child leaving to go to college, or you're working more hours away from home than you're used to, or you have construction in your house. Those are all little stresses, and having supplements to help get you through that is beneficial. Also, taking a skin and coat supplement, maybe depending on the dog or the cat, during allergy season, if they have some seasonal allergies, that will help to further support the immune system to help them get through that. So yes, I do rely on supplements. And some people think, well, if the food is so superior, why do supplements? Well, just because of that, because at different times in our lives, we do need a little bit of extra help with nutrition in one way or another.
Yeah, I always use the example that I'll take, I walk him every day, but during the week when I'm working, I don't necessarily take him for, let's say, a hike, because it takes a lot more time. And I have found sometimes, I'll come back and you've done a good hike. And if I do 3 miles or 4 miles, he's done double because he's running back and forth the whole time. So he's getting a lot more exercise than I am. And every now and then he wakes up the next morning and I can tell he's stiff, just like we would get stiff.
Right.
Their joints, his muscles are sore. I do give him a good massage with essential oils because that's what I do. But I also have a few supplements I like to give him that are just good for joint mobility and health, and that soreness, decrease a little bit of the the tightness and all the all the chemicals or oxidation that's happened in compensation from that exertion. And that's a good stress, but it's still a stressor.
It sure is
still a stressor. And what about just to wrap it up, and I have, we probably could go on even more, but just what about age-specific age-specific foods, like puppy food versus middle age versus seniors? Do you find that it's really important to, I would assume puppy food is very different than, or pretty different than regular dog food because the nutrients and the vitamins might be different.
Actually, they're pretty close. A lot of companies will make puppy foods and adult foods and senior foods and weight loss foods and so forth. And there are times for certain pets where that is what they need. But a lot of times it's these big pet food companies that are trying to get to every part of the market. So that takes up more room on the shelves. And they can get more customers that way. But a good quality pet food, will have an all life stage that's good for puppies and adults and for seniors. They'll also have they should have a weight loss because not every dog is starting on that as puppyhood. As puppies, if they come into a good quality food and they are chunky or obese, it's nice to have a weight loss to transition them down to a good weight and then get on an all life stage. So a good quality food is going to have an all life stage, and that is good for puppies and seniors as well.
I think that's probably much more about amount and things like that than it is about the food. If it's such a good, like you said, if it's an all life stage food, probably more about quantity and weight and things like that versus, well, this is time for this puppy food versus an adult food versus a senior food. So I think I'm going to pipe in one last question because I just thought of it. And that is breed specific foods. So,
I'm sorry, what?
Breed specific foods? Because I know that there's some pet food companies that will have like a food that's specified for shepherds and a food that's specified for huskies, and they start to differentiate breeds and the breed type when they're in their food creation. And I don't know that much about that.
I don't know that much about that as well to really have a meaningful conversation. My view is that if it's a very good quality food, I don't believe that breed specific is going to make that big of a deal. It could. Like I said, I'm not all that up to date on that. But you also have to look at the ingredients and the quality of the ingredients. So, I really can't have a meaningful conversation on that, unfortunately.
No, I think it's something for people to investigate, and I'll find someone else to get on and maybe talk about these specific foods. It'll be a good topic.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that because I'd like to have that answer.
So thank you so much, Anne, for getting on, and please say hi to Stella for me.
I will.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us, and look for Anne's contact information details on my website. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Pets, People, Life, and Longevity, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.